Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Stephanie Hopper, and I am one of the directors of the talent practice at Capfinity. My co-host, Celine Floyd, should be with us fairly soon. She is dealing with an unhappy son at the moment, but I'm sure he will be happy very shortly and she'll be back here. A few words on Capfinity. We are a global business and we are based in Birmingham, London, Dublin, various US locations, and Sydney, Australia. And we've been helping organisations to find candidates, develop employees, and transform their business around our USP of strengths-based assessment and development for over 16 years now. So both myself and Celine work on iptiQ, which is Capfinity's leadership proposition, and is a market-leading method of assessing and developing your leaders through a strengths lens. Now, we are really lucky to have two fabulous guests with us today. I'm thrilled that they're both here, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves in a minute, but also to tell us a little bit about maybe why they're passionate about leadership. So let me start with Mary. So Mary, we met many years ago, and it's great to have you here today. So tell us a little bit about you.
It's really wonderful our paths have crossed again. So hello, Steph, thanks for having me. So I'm a leadership coach and consultant. So I work with leaders in usually senior levels within organizations who are wanting to affect change and are leading change. And I also design and develop leadership development programs. I have a special interest in working with women leaders, actually. And I'm also author of the book, Ego, Get Over Yourself and Lead, which really is about helping us. I mean, over the years that I've worked with leaders, the big thing that gets in our own way is ourselves. So that's what my book's really about, is how can we get out of our own way in order to really fulfill our potential.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mary. And Priyanka, welcome.
Thank you, Steph. I'm Priyanka. Really nice to be here. So thank you for inviting me. I'm the head of HR for iptiQ by Swiss Re. iptiQ is an insurtech fully owned by Swiss Re. And I live in London with my husband and two teenage daughters. Very quickly, I am really passionate about, well, first of all, I'm really passionate about tech. So I think I found my kind of niche there. But interestingly, leadership has definitely been a focus area throughout my HR career. I mean, leaders play such a pivotal role in creating the culture, driving results, and really as leaders, we can really leave our mark on organizations, but also people, communities. There's so much we can do. So super excited to talk about this topic. Can't speak enough about leadership legacy particularly.
Brilliant. Yes. And I think you're so right. Leaders really are, a lever, aren't they, to so much that organisations need to do. Celine, your thoughts?
Hello, ladies. I'm so sorry. I have a small guest with us today.
Oh, well, that's lovely.
Can't be separated. So we'll see what pearls of wisdom he leaves us with later. But thank you. I was listening intently behind the scenes there. As Steph said, delighted to have you with us, Mary and Priyanka, for what should be a really good discussion. We've wanted to do this episode for a while, looking at the topic of leadership legacy, and obviously it's a very emotive, deep topic. So it's a wonderful topic to be dissecting with you both today, and I think, as humans, it's one of the kind of strange things, isn't it, that we go through our lives and actually seem to be able to forget day to day that there is a deadline on us, when we're not going to be here forever, but yet we can kind of keep going and get lost in the day to day. And I was thinking about this from a leadership perspective in terms of business, and I was reading an article that made reference to the old riddle of, if a tree falls in the woods and no one hears it, did it actually fall? And this article made a link to leadership around, if a leader is in the office every day, doing decades worth of work, but actually they haven't made an impact, were they a leader at all? And so to me, it got me thinking about leadership legacy, and the role of a leader in leaving something for the organization that is bigger than them and will kind of outlive their time within that organization. It's such an important area. So perhaps to start us off, it would be good to get both your views on what leadership legacy actually means, and perhaps if you could bring to life examples of where you've seen people create really powerful leadership legacies, that would be wonderful. So if I could come to Priyanka, first of all, what are your views on that?
Sure. And Celine, I am so pleased to have your son on the show. It just makes it so much more
glad
fun.
You are.
Yeah. So such a multifaceted question. I mean, honestly, I would say for me personally, I think leadership and the legacy we want to leave behind starts with what difference you as a leader wants to make and how you want to really show up as a leader. I mean, to be honest, as a leader, we have a finite period of time to really impact people. And it's really, what lives on. And I think the more we look upon it as a huge responsibility that we have to really, be a force for good, I think the more of an impact we can make, because as I just mentioned, what's really amazing is, particularly today's leaders, we're not just confined to the organization. We can make so much of a difference in to, first of all, to individuals, but also to communities. We think about all the organizations shaping societal opinion. There is really a lot we can do. And when I think of leaders who I personally follow or who have made a mark on me, I can definitely think of a few. Fortunately, some I've worked with. But I would start off with bringing a non-organizational example, Mahatma Gandhi. I think he is definitely one person I've always admired. He really truly embodies that servant leadership. And then in another person like him, I guess, in an organizational context is Satya Nadella. Really humble, really visionary, leads by example. So I've lots to learn from there. But today I'd like to actually talk about our Swiss Re CEO, Christian Mumenthaler, who I've been so impressed with, because he is, I feel, the prototype of today's leader, really humble, very much in the mold of the leaders I've talked about, really humble, really grounded, highly, highly values driven. And the reason I'm talking about Christian is because he has, he's quite vocal about the fact that, his role is a point in time. And he's here really to take the company to a better place from where he found it, but also create a pipeline of really great leaders who can carry the heritage forward. And really, I think that is what true leadership is and true leadership legacy is.
Thank you. Yeah, I love the reference to humility there. So there's been lots of research, especially in the last few years, around humble leadership and the link to having a growth mindset, which we know is predictive of successful leadership generally. And also this idea of thinking about your leadership pipeline. And, I don't think enough leaders do that properly, do they? Thinking beyond beyond themselves and kind of what comes next. So thank you. Yeah, wonderful references there. And Mary, does that chime with your view?
On many levels. I actually think legacy covers so many different elements, and I think you're right to say it's a very big and deep topic. I would say, as a parent, you are leaving a legacy. part of your legacy, Celine, is sitting on your knee today, you know? So being a parent, bringing up the next generation is a legacy. And so many of us are involved in that. And that is a big responsibility. So that is part of legacy. And I also view legacy as, you know, we talk about, I was Googled it before we came on, thought I'd have a quick look and see what came up. It came out, what's the legacy that Obama left? Or what's the legacy that Trump left? Because whether you like it or not, they're still leaving a legacy, whether you agree with what they're doing or not. They're still leaving the state of the world as they found it when they arrived there, different to when they first arrived. So once they've gone, it's different to how they first arrived. And that's looking at it on a very big level, but I also think it's on a microcosmic level as well. So on a day-to-day basis, particularly in leadership, because leadership is so impactful in terms of culture, and culture is so impactful in terms of how well people perform and how well organizations perform. So even on that microcosmic level, it's like, how do you leave a person once you've left the room and had that conversation with them? Think about the performance conversations you might be having, or having to talk to somebody about a new direction the team might be going in. How are you going to leave people at the end of that conversation? And I think for leaders, it's really important that they bear that in mind, that they don't just think about, oh, this is the job we've got to do, but actually we've got to think about, how do I want people to feel? How do I want to make sure they're engaged by the end of that? How do I want to impact them as a leader in that conversation? And that is all part of your legacy that you're building. But in terms of who's inspired me, I mean, it's interesting just thinking about different types of leaders and what leaders can create. What came to mind, and some people might like this, some people might not like it, because, you know, it's talking about a great big corporate, but I'm just thinking about Tesco and their massive growth under Terry Leahy, who also role modeled much more humble leadership, lots of humility there as well, but managed to grow that organization to become market leader. And it's still, to this day, his legacy is still in existence, because Tesco are still by far the biggest supermarket within the UK, and an enormous organization. And the thing that turned it around was the Tesco Club Card. That's what turned it around for them, was really understanding their customers, being able to get access to their customers' needs and wants, which is what marketing is all about, really, and therefore was able to develop that enormous legacy. So that's on a commercial level, but I'm also interested in community and society as a whole. So what is the legacy that leaders leave there? And I'm reminded of Erwin Turbot, actually, who was a chief of police in Ireland and dealing with a lot of the troubles in Ireland. And, you know, they were dealing with orange marches, and there being riots on the streets every year, and year in, year out, the police were trying to deal with this. And the turning point moment for him was recognizing that it wasn't just about them over there causing the trouble. Actually, we as the police are part of the challenge here, and we need to get round the table. And that get the round the table moment, that's when he created his legacy, because he was able to find a way forward and move things forward and impact that community. To this day, again, it's making changes that last, I think, that his legacy is about.
Yeah, I love that. I love what both of you have said, and the thing you talked about, Priyanka, around the pipeline of leaders, really reminded me of something that happened this week. I've been with a group of leaders this week in person. Yes. Who I've been working with for like almost 2 years virtually. So lovely to be together in a hotel and to actually see the 3D leaders. And we did this exercise with them where they did TED Talks, and one of them talked about her leadership, her legacy, really. I mean, I'm using the word legacy, she didn't. And her phrase was, and it plays into what both of you have said about humility, was, "It's not about me," was the title of her presentation. And she talked about how she plans to be made redundant. Like, that's her success criteria, that she's no longer needed, that she creates this, you know, these opportunities for other people to shine, hires people that are brighter than herself and lets them fly, and ensures that, you know, her succession plan is kind of top of her list. And I just thought it really chimed with things that both of you were saying there. And Mary, I just loved what you said about those micro legacies. You know how you leave someone feeling at the end of that one-to-one conversation. That is as important, isn't it? It's how people, it's our brand as well, isn't it, in the moment, like what people would say about us a week later or a year later, but also in terms of our legacy, it's how we're remembered, I think.
Yes, it is. Yes, it's never underestimating the impact you have. And, you know, I think there's also a link between legacy and purpose for me. So, you know, why do you do what you do? What's important to you about what you do? And that links very much into legacy. Like, you might have a massive purpose that isn't going to be achieved in your lifetime, but it's making that difference on a day-by-day basis. And then what are you leaving behind? It's the whole thing, you know, about the infinite game. I don't know if you've heard of Simon Sinek's book, which is wonderful because it really highlights that leadership is not just about a finite, let's achieve this goal. It's like, you know, I've got the baton for now. I'm going to make a difference with this here, and I'll pass it on to somebody else when my time is up. That sort of thing.
I think we've got another question. Celine, do you want to bring the other question in?
Yes, yeah. And forgive me again for just missing a little bit of the conversation there. But yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it, when we reflect back on senior leaders and leaders that have been in role for a while. And I think often the leaders that I engage with have been in a leadership position for a number of years. And some of them have thought about legacy for a long time, a long chunk of their career. Others are just starting to think about it. And so it always makes you think of, you know, emerging leaders as well, and the leaders that are in earlier on in their career. And I just wondered if either of you really had any kind of hints and tips, really, in terms of what leaders can be doing or thinking about to help them think about their legacy as early as possible, and therefore have the greatest impact in the organisations that they're working in. So, Mary, any hints and tips from you in the first instance?
I would say you're creating legacy, whether you think you're creating it or not. You are creating a legacy. So the first thing to do is get conscious about it. So, you know, hearing you talk about that leader who's thinking about his legacy, that's the first stage, is start to become aware of what is it you want to create, what is important to you, what is, and my experience of working with leaders for many, many years, and not just leaders, but human beings, is in each of us is the drive to make a difference. We want to make a difference in the world in some shape or form. So starting to get clear about that, and therefore starting to build up your own self-awareness around your own values, what's important to you, what things give you great joy, what things really annoy you, because that's a real indication of when your values aren't being met, when you're feeling annoyed or irritated by things. And therefore, what is the difference you want to make? Rather than just being annoyed about it, what is the recommendation or the shift you want to see happen and make in the world, and create a stand for that. So building that self-awareness muscle is absolutely number one, and getting clear about what legacy it is you want to be creating.
Yeah, self-awareness, absolutely. And perhaps also acknowledging that, you know, realizing what you want your legacy to be isn't something that comes overnight, is it? You know, it can take a long time for people to realize what they want their kind of legacy to be. Okay. Priyanka.
I mean, I couldn't agree more, Mary. I mean, I think it absolutely starts with self-awareness, knowing self, knowing that when it comes to the crunch, what really are my values? What am I really motivated by? So I think I would encourage every early leader to start there. And the one thing I love is also exploring, life's crucibles. So what are those shaping moments? Really reflecting, really honestly reflecting on that. And that tells you more than anything else can. That's a way to get that self-awareness. And then, I mean, the other is feedback, really being open to feedback, because there is no better way than, having that mirror and to find out more about yourself. Yeah, of course, reflection, if you can do that. And then I think something you mentioned, Mary, about being conscious. I mean, I think of that as intentionality, and being very, very. It comes with it's it's a couple of stages. You start with knowing who you are, what you stand for, and then it moves on to, okay, how do I want to show up? So that's intentionality, really. How do I want to show up? And I would say that really works, certainly for me.
I had thank you, Priyanka. I had a really interesting session with a senior leader just last week, actually, and I was asking him about his aspirations for the leadership legacy that he leaves, and he just very confidently and assertively said that he isn't interested in leaving a legacy. And that he loves his work, he loves the organization, he loves his role, but actually he has purpose and is looking to create a legacy outside of work. And so for work, it doesn't have those parameters for him. And so it really got me thinking. And I am being unpredictable on multiple levels today, clearly. But my other question I just want to throw in is whether we think that someone can be a successful leader and not have a focus on leaving a legacy.
I mean, I'll flip that question a little bit, because while you were talking, I was also thinking you don't have to be a leader to lead. You don't need, well, what I mean is you don't need that positional power.
Yeah.
I mean, at Swiss Re, and I'm sure most organizations, we talk about leadership without having that positional power. So we've got I don't want to call it a program, but some guidelines as called Leadership from Every Seat. So how do you take responsibility? What's your accountability, whether you are the CEO or the graduate who has just joined the organization? And I will say that it's also thinking about, for example, celebrities. You can be a leader as a celebrity because you use your brand to make a difference, right? So it's really it's looking at it from that perspective. And whether you want to leave a legacy or not, I would actually turn around and ask that leader, do you want to make a difference? I mean, if you don't, you're a waste of space, right? Sorry, I'm just being really blunt. But everyone wants to make a difference, to your point, Mary, right? You want to make a difference. So that's your legacy. It doesn't need to be a grand word.
I think that's it. I think the word can be quite off-putting for some people, can't it? And I think maybe that's what was happening with this particular individual, that it felt like he was having to sign up to some really transformational purpose.
Yes.
And actually, if we translate it more as being about making a difference, it's much more accessible to more people, including aspiring leaders. I think
So I was just going to say, all I was going to say is I think it could be an Excel macro. That's a legacy. A bit of code. That's a legacy, isn't it? I mean, as Priyanka said, you don't have to be a leader to leave a legacy. It's something that you've left that other people make use of. Sorry, go on, Mary.
I suppose what I would say is he's leaving a legacy anyway. He might not want to leave a legacy, but he is leaving a legacy. He can't. Yeah. He hasn't got a choice in that. Because he is. Because
that's right. Yeah.
What you leave behind you is a legacy, whether it's something that's absolutely wonderful or something that's a complete disaster and chaos or whatever. You still left a legacy. So, but it may be that you're right. The word may feel too big, too serious. But I mean, certainly in the organisations I've worked with, both as an external coach and when I've been employed, the focus has very much been on what has changed on your shift. So part of the expectation of leadership within the corporate world particularly is making a difference of some sort and changing things. And that's your legacy, really, at the end of the day. That if things have changed while you've been around and you leave, that's your legacy.
That's your legacy. Yeah, no, that's right.
I love what you just said about, whether you like it or not, you are leaving a legacy, and then it might as well be a good one, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't want to be that toxic leader who is only about themselves. So, of course, we have to approach it with consciousness and intentionality.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's been a brilliant discussion, and I love that it started with Celine's legacy sitting on her lap. I mean, how appropriate is that? It's just brilliant.
Oh my goodness.
So, in summary, I guess some of the things I've heard is we talked a little bit, didn't we, about leaders who are building a pipeline and a succession, and that being an important part of their legacy. We also talked about, how you are remembered is your legacy. And actually, Mary rightly said, whether you like it or not, you're creating a legacy. And that's very, very, very true. And I love that we talked about the micro level influence that a leader can have. It's not just about these big purposeful changes, but it's also about how they make each individual feel. And the other thing was the self-awareness muscle, that being absolutely critical in really thinking about our legacies. Let me come to Mary for a final word. What would your parting thoughts be on this topic?
Well, I think leadership is not about status. It's not about me. It's about making a difference and about taking a stand for something that is probably bigger than you are. And I think that's where legacy lives, in that place of it's bigger than you are. So don't feel, although having said that, you can make the small difference on a day-to-day basis, but on an ongoing basis, it's something that you can buy into and leave for others to follow on with and continue to make that difference.
Absolutely. Priyanka, your final thought.
I would add to that to say that, as a leader, we are in such a advantageous position. We can create this massive ripple effect if we actually consider the power we have to be a force for good. So really thinking about what is that imprint that I want to leave behind by, what I say and what I do. And honestly, as we've just discussed, you don't have to have that positional power to do that. You can do it as an individual contributor. You can do it as a parent, literally at every stage of life.
Brilliant. And Celine, your final thought.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating topic, and I think I was really struck thinking about how the word legacy can be quite a big word for some people, and we talked about how what we're really looking at here is making a difference and creating something that is there after you've left, and I always I really like, and I always reflect on that well-known phrase of people don't remember what you said to them or what you do, they remember how you feel. And I think actually that's all a legacy that all of us leave all of the time, around how we make others feel. And so I think our job as leaders and as people that support leaders within organizations, it's around making legacy an accessible concept and an accessible term, and empowering everyone to feel like they have the opportunity to leave a legacy, because we all do genuinely, some very small and some some are seismic on their scale, but it doesn't mean that one is more worthy than the other. So yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Celine. And I caught this quote this week, which is really relevant to our conversation. Some of you might follow Adam Grant, the psychologist who wrote Option B, the book with Sheryl Sandberg. And he said, meaning is about making a difference, not having an audience. It's better to be valued by a few than to be known by many. Your contribution is not the scope of your reach, it's the depth of your impact. Your legacy is not how many footprints you leave, it's how long they last. And I just thought that was lovely.
Yeah. I love that. That's fabulous.
Yeah, that's really lovely.
So
I'm glad you went last with that, Steph, because it would have been a hard one to follow.
You left a great legacy there, Stephanie.
You have.
That's what's important, isn't it, ladies? Anyway, we will see everyone in 2 weeks' time. We have an Asia Pacific episode broadcasting live from Singapore and Sydney in 2 weeks' time, talking about how Asia Pacific leaders are handling the hybrid world and the challenges that the pandemic has lent to that side of the world. So thank you very much, Mary and Priyanka, for your time today, and Celine and Dominic for being with us. And we will see you in a couple of weeks' time.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.